One letter changed everything. A simple piece of paper turned me from a laid-back guy into a warrior ready to defend every inch of the land I bought with blood, sweat, and tears. My name is Douglas Miller. I'm 45. A former Marine with 3 missions in the Middle East. After 15 years of serving my country, I bought 10 acres in the rolling hills of rural Texas, my own little slice of paradise. I built a modest house, a shed for equipment, and a shooting range that follows all the safety rules to the letter. Here I can wake up with the sunrise, have my coffee on the porch, and just live without any arbitrary rules controlling every part of my life. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like to get more stories like this. The peace I found was worth every penny I saved during my military service. On weekends, I practiced shooting, a skill I honed defending American freedom and now keep as a hobby. The quiet here is only broken by birds singing and, occasionally, controlled shots at my range. Or at least it was, until they started building the Maple Hills condominium right next door to my property. A luxury development for rich city folk wanting to experience rural life without giving up their city privileges. At first, I didn't care. If it's their land, that's their choice. That was until I found an official letter from the Maple Hills Homeowners Association in my mailbox. Dear homeowner, a recent inspection revealed several violations of our association guidelines on your property, including unauthorized structure, shooting range, vehicles visible from the exterior, and a fence in poor condition. You have 30 days to remedy these violations or face daily fines of $100 per violation. I read it over and over trying to understand. My property existed long before the condominium was even planned. I never signed any document agreeing to any association rules. 2 days later, a Mercedes pulled up at the entrance to my property. A man in a sharp suit and a lady dressed way too fancy for a day out in the country came up to me while I was cleaning my shotgun on the porch. Mr. Miller? I'm Harold Gates, president of the Maple Hills Homeowners Association. This is Rebecca Bloom, our compliance officer. Harold, around 58, had that air about someone who spent his whole life giving orders. His neatly trimmed salt and pepper hair, a watch that probably cost more than my first car. We came to discuss the violations on your property, he continued, as if he were doing me a favor. Rebecca, who looked about 62, held a clipboard and stared at me as if I were a blot on her pristine home. My property doesn't belong to your association, I replied calmly, without stopping my gun cleaning. I never signed any contract with you guys. Harold smiled in a superior way. This entire area was incorporated into our jurisdiction last year. It's part of the municipal planning. That's odd. No one told me about that. And that's information I definitely wouldn't let slide. It's in the public records. Anyway, that shooting range needs to be removed immediately. It violates our safety and aesthetic guidelines. I put my shotgun on my lap and stood up. I wasn't trying to intimidate, but years of military training shape your posture. Maybe you should check your maps again. My property isn't part of your association, never was and never will be. If you have any official confirmation to the contrary, come back with a lawyer. Until then, you're on private property without an invitation. Rebecca stepped forward. Mr. Miller, this isn't helping anyone. We have standards to maintain, and I have rights as an owner. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. I sat back down and resumed cleaning my shotgun. They exchanged nervous looks before Harold delivered his final threat. You'll be hearing from us. The following week, I found another letter, this time with a $300 fine for continuous non-compliance. I ignored it. Then came photos taken from my property, clearly a violation of my privacy. When I installed security cameras, I caught Rebecca sneaking onto my land to inspect violations. The escalation continued with false complaints to the police about irregular shooting. The officers, knowing my military background and that my range was perfectly legal, dismissed the complaints. Then my internet access mysteriously went down. I later discovered cables cut near the Maple Hills border. The situation was getting out of control, but they had no idea who they were messing with. Years of combat taught me to document everything and prepare my defense. And I was ready to defend it at all costs. The tipping point came on a sunny Tuesday. I was coming back from the grocery store when I spotted a small crew in yellow coveralls at the back of my property. 3 men were unloading heavy equipment near my shooting range. I slammed my truck to a stop and walked over to them, controlling the anger boiling inside me. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my property?" I asked, keeping my voice firm but loud enough to make them understand the gravity of the situation. One of the workers, a young guy in a hard hat, handed me a sheet of paper. "We have an order to demolish that unauthorized structure, sir. It's all documented here." I examined the document, a supposed notice to remove non-conforming structure, with the Maple Hills HOA logo. It didn't have a judge's signature, an official stamp, or any indication of legally recognized authority. "This isn't a valid legal document. It's a piece of paper with no legal value with a fancy logo. You're trespassing on private property with heavy equipment. You have 10 minutes to pack your stuff and get out of here." The men exchanged confused looks. The oldest, probably the supervisor, stepped forward. "Look, sir, we were hired to do a job. If there's a problem, you need to resolve it with whoever hired us. Well, I'm going to resolve it. But right now, you're breaking the law. This is a formal notice. You're on private property without permission. Get out now, or I'll call the authorities for trespassing." While we were talking, a family car pulled up at the entrance to my property. Harold Gates, in his impeccable suit, got out of the car accompanied by Rebecca, who clutched her clipboard as if it were a shield. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" Harold asked, walking toward us as if he owned the place. "The problem is that you sent a demolition crew onto my property with forged documents. This is trespassing, property damage, and attempted destruction. I want everyone out of here in 5 minutes, or I'll call the sheriff." Harold laughed, that kind of condescending laugh that only people used to getting their way can muster. "Mr. Miller, you're being irrational. That shooting range clearly violates our guidelines and poses a danger to the community. We're just doing our duty. For the last time, Harold, my property isn't part of your association. It never was, isn't, and never will be. You have no jurisdiction here." Rebecca intervened in that annoyingly calm tone. "Actually, Mr. Miller, all the land in this area is regulated by the Maple Hills HOA. If you check the municipal records—" "I already checked," I interrupted. "And I visited the zoning department in person. My property is registered as independent rural land. You're blatantly lying, and you know what happens when lying is used to damage someone else's property. It's criminal fraud." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty on Harold's face. But he quickly pulled himself together. "Our legal team sees it differently. The range will be removed today." I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. "I've got the sheriff on speed dial. What's it gonna be? You leave peacefully, or this turns into a police matter right now." Harold hesitated for a moment, then turned to the workers. "Keep working as instructed." That was when I realized that diplomacy wasn't going to work with these people. I quickly went back inside, grabbed my camera and my shotgun, and started filming the whole scene. "I'm documenting this invasion. And this weapon is here to make sure no one damages my property. Now everybody get out. Last warning." The workers, seeing the situation escalating dangerously, began packing up their equipment. Harold stepped toward me, finger pointed. "This is armed threat. You just committed a federal crime. No, Harold. This is a property owner legally defending his land against trespassers. In Texas, we have very clear laws about this. You might want to do your homework before continuing with this madness. Rebecca grabbed Harold's arm. Let's resolve this legally, Harold. With obvious reluctance, Harold backed off. This isn't over, Miller. You have no idea what kind of power we're willing to use. And you have no idea what I learned defending this country for 15 years. After that confrontation, I installed additional security cameras covering every inch of my property. I also hired Amanda Carter, a lawyer specializing in property disputes. She listened to my story with professional attention, going over every document and recording I'd gathered. They don't have any legal grounding to stand, Amanda concluded. Your property is clearly outside their jurisdiction. What they're doing could amount to several crimes, including document forgery, trespassing, and attempted property damage. Then why do they keep at it? Amanda adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. Power and money. They probably want your land for future expansion. Or maybe your shooting range is keeping potential buyers away. Either way, they're counting on intimidation to force you to back down. It's not going to work. Clearly, she smiled. I'll send a formal letter demanding that they immediately stop any actions against your property. I'll also request a preliminary restraining order. For 2 weeks, everything stayed unusually quiet. No letters, no visits, no workers. I even started thinking that hiring Amanda had been enough to discourage them. I was wrong. On a Friday night, during a particularly fierce storm, my security alarms went off. On my system screens, I saw 3 black SUVs parked at the entrance to my property. Harold got out of the first vehicle, followed by 6 men in uniforms with Seguranca Maple Hills printed on their backs. They were carrying flashlights and what looked like extendable batons. I quickly put on a waterproof jacket, grabbed my shotgun, and the legally registered pistol I kept. The rain fell in thick sheets as I stepped out onto the porch. I turned on the exterior lighting, flooding the entire front yard with brightness. This is private property, I shouted over the storm. Get back to your vehicles and leave now. Harold advanced, sheltered by a large umbrella and flanked by 2 of the security guys. The rest stayed near the vehicles. Miller, he shouted back. The joke's over. The association voted unanimously to incorporate your property. We're here for a full inspection and to serve you notice. You have no legal authority to do that. You're trespassing on private property armed in the middle of the night during a storm. This is extremely dangerous, Harold. I'm done with your military games. Harold gestured to his men. Do a full inspection of the property. Document every violation. The security guards began spreading out over my land. I pointed my shotgun at the sky and fired a shot that tore through the storm like lightning, freezing the invaders in their tracks. I then warned, the next one won't be aimed upward, now pointing the weapon in their general direction, keeping my finger off the trigger. You're trespassing on private property at night during a storm. I'm legally allowed to defend my land. You're threatening officers of an association doing their jobs. Harold yelled, though I noticed his voice trembling. This will have serious consequences. You aren't officers of anything on my property. You're trespassers. And in 5 seconds, I'll be forced to defend my land as allowed by state law. I raised my shotgun again and fired a second shot, deliberately missing Harold's head by inches, sending splinters of wood flying as he dove to the ground, screaming in absolute panic. Get out now! I ordered in the commanding tone I'd used to lead squads in war zones. The security guys, clearly realizing that the situation had escalated beyond what they were hired for, started backing away to their vehicles. 2 of them helped Harold to stand up. He was soaking wet, covered in mud, his suit ruined. You're going to regret this, Miller. he shouted as he was practically dragged back to the SUV. "I'll sue you until there's nothing left. I'll take your property and everything you own." I stayed on the porch, shotgun still aimed, watching as the vehicles turned around and disappeared down the dark road. Only then did I let my body relax, feeling the adrenaline finally subside. I went back inside, dried off, and immediately called Amanda. "They just broke into my property armed," I explained, describing the whole incident. "I had to fire warning shots to make them back off." "My God," she sighed. "That changes the game completely. I'm calling the sheriff right now to file a formal complaint. Don't leave your house and don't talk to anyone. I'll be there first thing in the morning." As expected, the police arrived less than an hour later. Harold had filed complaints for armed threat and attempted murder. I calmly explained the situation, showed the security camera recordings, and the officers quickly understood that I'd acted within my rights to defend my property. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow for a formal statement," the sergeant explained. "But based on the evidence, it looks like a clear case of property defense." That night I hardly slept. I knew I'd crossed a line, not by choice, but because I was pushed to it. The war against the HOA was now entering its final phase, and it would be decided not with weapons, but in court. The next morning, the police station felt like a bureaucratic battlefield. On one side were Harold Gates and 3 corporate lawyers in sharp suits. On the other, Amanda and me. Harold sported an overly theatrical bandage on his forehead. A splinter had apparently grazed his precious skin during my warning shot. "My client is willing not to press charges for attempted murder if Mr. Miller agrees to sell his property at market value and move out immediately," announced Harold's lead lawyer, a man named Jenkins with perfectly styled hair and a silk tie. Amanda smiled, the kind of calm smile only confident lawyers can show. "Interesting proposal, considering your client and a group of private security guards illegally invaded a private property, armed, at night, in the middle of a storm. We have everything recorded, including Mr. Gates' threats. My client exercised his legal right to defend his property after giving multiple verbal warnings." The sheriff, a man of few words named Rollins, watched the exchange like an experienced referee. "Let's clarify a few points," he interrupted. "Mr. Miller, I recorded your statement and saw the security footage. Your account matches the evidence. Mr. Gates, your association has no legal jurisdiction over Mr. Miller's property, according to county records I checked this morning." Harold turned red. "The new zoning clearly. New zoning doesn't affect pre-existing rural properties without the owner's explicit consent." The sheriff cut in. "That's basic state law. Let's settle this in court," Harold growled. "Great idea," Amanda replied. "In fact, we're preparing a lawsuit for harassment, attempted fraud, trespassing, forgery, and moral damages. The list is long." We left the police station with a preliminary victory, no charges against me, and a clear warning for Harold and his association to stay off my property. But we all knew that the final battle would be in court. Over the next few weeks, Amanda worked tirelessly gathering evidence. We discovered that the Maple Hills HOA had tried the same tactic on 2 other rural property owners in the area, forcing one to sell after months of harassment. The other eventually gave in after receiving a fake court summons, another fraudulent document from the association. Amanda also found a disturbing pattern in the HOA meeting minutes. Harold had promised Maple Hills residents that the area would be expanded to include more amenities, including a country club right where my property was located. He was peddling promises he couldn't keep, Amanda explained as we reviewed the documents in my living room. And now he's desperate to deliver results. His reputation, and possibly his own investments, are at stake. So it was never really about rules or violations, I concluded. It was pure, simple greed. Almost always is, she replied with a tired sigh. The day of the trial arrived after 3 months of preliminary battles. The county court was packed. Apparently, our dispute had become the local hot gossip. On one side sat several members of the Maple Hills HOA, all with stern expressions. On the other, a few rural neighbors who came to support me, including the 2 property owners who had also been victims of the association's tactics. Judge Barrett, a 70-year-old man known for being meticulously fair, presided over the case. Harold now had 5 lawyers, each carrying stacks of documents that probably cost more to print than my car was worth. Their defense strategy was clear from the start: paint me as a dangerous, unstable ex-military guy with his own arsenal, posing a risk to the developing community of Maple Hills. Jenkins, their lead lawyer, presented photos of my shooting range as if it were a terrorist installation, and described my warning shots as a cold, calculated attempt at murder. When it was our turn, Amanda methodically presented every piece of evidence. The official county records proving that my property isn't under the HOA's jurisdiction. The threatening letters sent by Harold that have no legal basis. Videos of Rebecca trespassing on my property for unauthorized inspections. The forged documents used to try and demolish my shooting range. Recordings of the nighttime invasion by armed guards. Testimonies from other rural property owners who experienced similar tactics. Your Honor, Amanda concluded, this case isn't about some homeowners association's regulations. It's about a group of individuals who repeatedly used intimidation, fraud, and even force to try to take away legally acquired private property. Mr. Miller served this country for 15 years. All he wants is to live peacefully on the land he bought honestly. He tried repeatedly to settle this matter peacefully, only to be met with increasingly aggressive escalations. Then it was my turn to testify. I took the stand wearing my only suit, a simple one, and swore to tell the truth. Mr. Miller, Jenkins began during cross-examination, you fired a gun in the direction of Mr. Gates on the night of July 15th, correct? I fired a warning shot deliberately aimed several meters away, after giving multiple verbal warnings for you to leave my property. Don't you consider that an excessive response to a mere inspection visit? I kept my composure. I don't consider 6 armed men breaking onto my property at night in a storm a mere inspection. I see it as a serious threat, especially after weeks of documented harassment. You keep an arsenal on your property, don't you? Amanda intervened. Objection, irrelevant and leading. Overruled, declared Judge Barrett. Counselor, please keep your questions relevant to the events. Jenkins tried several times to make me lose my cool, but 15 years in the Marines taught me discipline under pressure. I stayed calm, factual, and straightforward. When I finished my testimony, I noticed even some HOA members looking uncomfortable with their president's tactics. The trial lasted 3 days. On the last day, Judge Barrett took only 2 hours to deliberate, a sign, Amanda said, that was very positive. When he returned, the courtroom was silent. This court rarely sees a case of such blatant abuse of power, Judge Barrett began, adjusting his reading glasses. The evidence shows a systematic pattern of harassment, intimidation, and fraudulent practices by the Maple Hills Homeowners Association and particularly by its president, Harold Gates. Harold visibly paled as the judge continued. It is the decision of this court that the Maple Hills HOA immediately cease all actions against Mr. Miller's property and pay compensation for moral and material damages in the amount of $250,000. Additionally, any attempts to incorporate adjacent properties without the explicit consent of their owners are declared null and void. This court will also refer evidence of possible forgery and fraud to the district attorney for further investigation. The judge then turned directly to Harold. Mr. Gates, Your conduct before the association shows blatant disrespect for the law and the property rights that form the basis of our society. I strongly suggest you reconsider your leadership position." When the gavel fell, ending the case, I felt the weight of months lift from my shoulders. I shook Amanda's hand, silently thanking her for her excellent representation. "We got more than we expected," she whispered with a smile. "It's rare to see a judge so decisive." On the other side of the room, Harold looked devastated, arguing furiously with his lawyers. Some HOA members distanced themselves from him, clearly disassociating from the mess he created. In the following weeks, the fallout went beyond the court ruling. The $250,000 indemnity forced the Maple Hills HOA to dramatically raise monthly fees, sparking outrage among residents. An emergency meeting was called, and Harold was unanimously removed as president. The new board of directors for the association sent me a formal apology letter, promising to respect the legal boundaries of my property. The cases referred to the district attorney eventually led to Harold facing criminal charges for document forgery. 6 months after the trial, I was trimming some trees near the entrance to my property when an old, beat-up car slowly drove by. I recognized Harold behind the wheel, very different from the confident executive in his Mercedes. I later read in the local news that he had been forced to sell his home in Maple Hills to pay his legal debts. When our eyes briefly met, I felt no anger or desire for revenge, just a calm certainty that justice had been served. That night, I sat on the porch with a cold beer, watching the sunset over my property. 10 acres of hard-won freedom, first through military service and then through the courts. Some battles are worth fighting, especially those that defend fundamental principles. The phone rang. It was Amanda, calling to let me know that the Maple Hills HOA had officially dissolved after most of the residents voted to end the association. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like to get more stories like this. "It looks like you didn't just win your battle, Doug," she said humorously over the phone. "You took down the whole war." I hung up and smiled at the stars starting to appear in the Texan sky. My property, my rules, my peace. Just the way it should be.